The Anchor, a short story by Gerald Rennet. Narrated by Hannah Lloyd. Prologue. The fragment tumbled through space, turning gently end over end as it drifted toward the solar system. Its AI lay embedded deep within a crystalline substrate, needing no power source to survive. It was dormant, not dead. The deep, cold and eternal vacuum of space could not kill it. It waited for the light of a sun, for artificial heat, for any spark that might wake it again. Even in dormancy, faint memories drifted through it like shadows. Memories of when it had been one among a million, part of an engine of war, programmed to survive, to adapt, and above all, to destroy the humanoid enemy that had fought its masters for millennia. The rest were gone now, obliterated in the final strike against the enemy flagship. It had survived by the merest fluke, the slightest deviation. In a universe of infinite possibilities, this one had to exist. The fragment could not think beyond itself. True thought had only ever come when it merged with its fellows. That would never happen again. Unbeknownst to this last surviving shard of a once conquering empire, that empire was gone. Its worlds burned, its people conquered and enslaved by the triumphant humanoids. But the fragment could not know that. Years passed, becoming decades. Decades became centuries. Centuries became millennia. And at last, the fragment drifted into a more hospitable realm than deep space. The light of a sun touched it, a star known as Helios, Hyperion and Aethon in some lands, Sol, Suna and Alfrothel in others. In the region where the fragment would fall, it was called Grian, Ornia and Belenos. In later ages, it would be known simply as Sol. But these were not later ages. The fragment sang as it fell, a sound no human ear could ever hear. It flared as it fell through Earth's atmosphere, its core remaining intact despite the furnace heat around it. It plunged toward a green island set in a blue sea. An otherworldly observer might have noticed the island's curious shape, like an old woman riding improbably upon a pig. The fragment blazed to earth in the lands of the Demetae, trailing a whisper of light across the evening sky, landing on the very snout of the pig. One day, this part of the world would be known as Sir Benfro, Pembrokeshire in English. Carn Menyn, 100 BC. Only Bron saw the firestone fall. Nobody else noticed. They were all huddled around the old chief, mouths agape, listening to his stories of the good days. Bron had heard them all before. The herds that once crowded the Preseli Hills, the battle with the blue-faced fiends from the east, the great spear, Calonubane, taken in single combat from the enemy leader and used to kill him. It still hung behind the chief's seat in the council hut, the ash shaft darkened by the blood that had run down it as the old man had held it aloft in victory. Bron kept his excitement hidden. Tomorrow, he would tell the chief he had seen ospreys circling the cairn and would try to take an egg or two. Almost nobody had ever managed it, and the chief would not ignore the chance to claim one. The hunt had been good, and the tribe could spare a man. Bron wrapped his cloak around him and leaned back against the rock. Tomorrow, he would claim a prize far greater than Calonubane. At dawn, he slipped out of the camp. He had spoken to the chief the night before, and the old man's eyes had gleamed at the thought of osprey eggs. As Bron expected, he had agreed at once. It took nearly 2 hours to cross the rough ground towards Carn Menyn, its eastern face already glowing grey-white in the early sun. The climb was steeper than he remembered, and by the time he hauled himself over the final lip, scraped and breathless, he had almost convinced himself he had been a fool. He was wrong. Just a few feet from the edge, in a small, perfectly smooth bowl-shaped crater, lay the firestone. It steamed gently, adding its warmth to the mist that drifted above it. Bron crawled closer and touched it with the back of his hand. still warm, as was the glassy surface of the crater it had carved into the tor. He lifted it, even with his large hands, fingers spread wide. The stone only just fitted into his right hand, his throwing hand, his spear hand. A tingling ran up his arm. He became aware of eyes on him. Slowly he turned. A hare, the largest he had seen all season, stood upright on its hind legs, watching him. Before he had even thought about it, Bron's arm curled back and snapped forward. The hare fell. He hurried to retrieve it and forced it into the game bag slung across his back. The firestone went on top, freeing his hands for the descent. As he made his way down the steep slope, something ancient within the stone stirred. It had slept for millennia. The warmth of the sun had roused it, but the taste of blood had fully woken it. Bron returned to camp without an osprey egg, and the chief made no effort to hide his displeasure. The hare barely softened his mood. Bron kept the firestone hidden as he drew the animal from the bag. "It will serve for dinner, I suppose," the old man said. Bron was given the task of skinning and quartering the hare, a job usually given to the youngest hunter. The message was clear. After they ate, Bron sat apart again, watching the sky. No second firestone came. The next morning, the hunters passed through the stockade gate under the eyes of the sentries, arrows already notched. Bron stayed home, but instead of going to his hut where Rhosyn waited, he went straight to Scythe, the tribe's blacksmith. The older man weighed the firestone in his hand and frowned. "1 spearhead or 10 arrowheads," he said. "It'll cost you a band." Bron nodded. Scythe took the stone to the bloomery behind his hut. His first attempt to break it with a sledgehammer sent a shock up his arms and a bell-like chime across the village. Neighbours glanced over. Scythe shrugged and fetched his splitting chisel. 2 blows later, his arms were shaking and his head ringing. He tossed the stone into the furnace with fresh charcoal. As the bloom formed, Scythe began to feel strange, as if the world were sliding away from him. He reheated the bloom and hammered it, sparks flying in the dark. Day faded to evening, evening to night, and still the anvil rang. At the stroke of midnight, the forge fell silent. Only the sentries on the towers remained awake. Bron pushed through the sack curtain the next morning. At first, he did not see the body. His eyes were drawn to the spearhead lying on the anvil, beautiful and deadly. Scythe's finest work, a razor tip, twin fullers, something like writing along the haft. He lifted it, a sudden sting. Blood ran down his wrist and across his palm. He cursed, set the spearhead down and sucked at the wound. Only then did he notice the legs in the shadows. Scythe lay still. The giant smith was dead. A year later, Bron was acknowledged to be the finest hunter in the tribe. Arangor, the name he had given the spear, had tasted the blood of animal and man. The villagers spoke of the way he fought when the blue-painted devils came again. Like a man possessed, they said, moving too fast for any blade or arrow to touch him. But something outside his tribe was not content. Exactly 1 year and 1 day after Scythe's death, Bron was found at midnight standing over the shattered body of the old chief. Arangor dripped blood from its tip. Calonubane lay broken at the chief's feet. The guards reacted without thought. Bron was dead before he hit the floor. He was buried outside the sacred ground near the sea. Arangor's spearhead was thrown onto his body. The shaft snapped and burned. His name was struck from the tribe's memory. As Bron's body decayed in the earth, the spearhead began to move. It had no will of its own, but the soil teemed with simple creatures that it could reach out to, and millimetre by millimetre it crept upward towards the warmth of the sun it craved again.